The storm came without warning, like a reckoning long delayed. Across the wide Wyoming plains, the sky split open with jagged streaks of lightning, illuminating the land in violent flashes. Thunder followed close behind, rolling like a drum of war, shaking the ground beneath hooves and heart alike. Rain lashed down in relentless sheets, turning the red dirt road into a river of mud and ruin. Through that storm rode Eliza Carter. Her figure was small against the vast fury of nature, yet she pressed forward with desperate resolve. Her soaked dress clung tightly to her body, heavy with rain, the fabric torn at the hem from branches and reckless flight. Her curls, once neatly pinned, now hung loose and wet against her face. Her hands gripped the reins with trembling force, knuckles pale, fingers stiff with cold. But she did not slow. She could not. Behind her lay something far worse than the storm. Jacob Rollins. Though no rider followed her now, his presence lived in her mind like a shadow that would not loosen its grip. His voice echoed through every crack of thunder, every violent gust of wind. "You belong to me." The words had once been soft, wrapped in charm and promises. He had come to her with roses, with plans of a home, with dreams carefully painted in honeyed tones. But beneath it all had lived something darker: control, possession, violence. Eliza's breath hitched as the memory surged, his hand tangled in her hair, dragging her across the floor, his voice low and cruel as he reminded her that her will meant nothing. She shook her head sharply, as if she could cast the memory away. "No," she whispered into the storm, "not anymore." Clutched tightly in her hand was the one thing that still gave her strength: the unsigned marriage contract. The paper was soaked through, the ink bleeding into blurred streaks, but the truth it carried had not changed. She had not signed. She was not his. Not yet. A flash of lightning revealed the road ahead, twisted, muddy, barely visible beneath the rain. Her horse faltered. The animal's breath came in harsh bursts, sides heaving as it struggled to keep pace against the storm. Its hooves slipped dangerously in the thick mud, fighting for balance with every step. "Eliza, please," she murmured softly, though she urged it forward all the same. Freedom was ahead. It had to be. But the storm had its own will. Without warning, the horse's front legs buckled beneath it. It crashed hard into the mud with a force that sent Eliza flying from the saddle. She struck the ground with a sharp cry, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. For a moment, everything went still. Then pain rushed in. Her arm throbbed, her ribs burned. Cold mud seeped into her skin, stealing what little warmth remained. "Eliza," she gasped, pushing herself up with shaking hands. The horse lay nearby, sides rising and falling rapidly, too exhausted to stand. "No, please," she whispered, crawling toward it. She grasped at the reins, pulling weakly, trying to coax the animal back to its feet. But it did not move. It could not. And in that moment, something inside her gave way. She sank into the mud, rain beating down upon her as tears slipped freely down her face, lost within the storm. This was it. If Jacob found her now, her chest tightened with suffocating fear. The world seemed to close in around her, filled with memories she could not outrun. The house, the silence, the violence hidden behind closed doors. "I can't go back," she choked, her voice breaking. "I won't." The storm answered with thunder, and then hoofbeats, different, steady, measured. Eliza froze. Her body went rigid, every muscle locking in fear. She did not turn at first. She did not dare hope. The sound grew louder, cutting cleanly through the chaos of wind and rain. Then a figure emerged. Through the curtain of falling water, a silhouette took shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, seated atop a powerful black horse. The animal moved with strength and control, untouched by the exhaustion that had claimed hers. The rider slowed as he approached. For a brief moment, he simply looked at her. Eliza forced herself to meet his gaze. Beneath the wide brim of his hat, his face was weathered, sun-worn, marked by years and silence. But there was no cruelty there, no hunger for control, only steadiness. He dismounted without a word. Boots sank into the mud as he stepped toward her, his presence firm, unshaken by the storm. Rain slid from his coat, his movements deliberate and calm. Eliza tried to speak. Her voice failed her. Her strength was gone. All that remained was the fragile thread of hope she no longer trusted. The man crouched beside her. His eyes flicked briefly to the bruise on her wrist, then returned to her face. He did not ask who she was, did not ask where she came from. Instead, he reached out, slowly, carefully, as though approaching something wounded. His voice came low and steady, cutting through the storm with quiet certainty. "Don't be afraid." The words were simple, but they were not empty. He lifted her easily, steady and sure, placing her gently onto his horse. Eliza clung weakly to the saddle, her body trembling as the last of her resistance faded. "Where?" she whispered faintly. He mounted behind her, one arm firm at her side, anchoring her in place. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt distant, unreal. But as the horse turned, carrying her away from the broken road, away from the storm, away from the life that had nearly swallowed her whole, Eliza Carter closed her eyes, and for the first time since she had run, she allowed herself to believe it.
Morning came gently, as though the world wished to forget the violence of the night before. A pale mist rested over Whispering Creek, clinging to the trees and drifting low across the hillside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet so complete it felt almost sacred. Sunlight filtered softly through damp branches, turning droplets of rain into scattered shards of gold. Inside the cabin, Eliza Carter stirred. For a moment, she did not move. Her body lay still beneath a thick wool blanket, her eyes fixed on the wooden beams overhead. The warmth around her felt unfamiliar, too steady, too kind. She listened. No thunder, no shouting, no footsteps pacing in anger, only the faint crackle of a dying fire. Her fingers tightened slowly around the edge of the blanket. Safe. The word returned to her, fragile and uncertain. Carefully, she pushed herself upright. Pain answered at once, sharp in her ribs, dull in her arm, but she did not cry out. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than sound. The cabin was small, but orderly. A rough wooden table stood near the window. A shelf held a few worn books. A cast-iron pot rested near the hearth, still warm. Her dress, now dried, hung neatly beside the fire. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was threatening. And yet unease lingered. Eliza swung her feet to the floor and rose slowly, pulling the blanket tightly around her shoulders. She moved toward the doorway, each step cautious, as though the ground itself might betray her. Outside, the steady sound of an axe split the quiet. She paused at the threshold. Nathaniel Hayes stood a few yards from the cabin, splitting wood. Each strike was clean and deliberate. His movements carried strength, but not anger. There was no wasted motion, no restless force, only purpose. His broad frame shifted with each swing, steady as the rhythm he kept. Eliza watched him in silence. He did not look like a man who needed to prove power. That alone unsettled her. As if sensing her presence, Nathaniel stopped. He turned slightly, his gaze settling on her. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then he lowered the axe. "You should still be resting," he said, his voice rough, unused, but calm. No demand, no expectation, just a statement. Eliza lowered her eyes. "I didn't want to trouble you." Nathaniel studied her for a moment, then nodded once as if accepting the answer without question. He stepped past her, into the cabin, carrying a small bundle of wood. Eliza followed slowly. Inside, he set the wood beside the hearth and stirred the fire until flames rose again. Warmth spread through the room, filling the quiet space. "There's porridge," he said, gesturing toward the stove. Eliza hesitated. She was not used to being offered anything without condition. Still, she stepped forward and sat at the table. Nathaniel placed a wooden bowl before her and stepped back, giving her space. She lifted the spoon carefully. The porridge was plain, thin, but warm. She swallowed once, then again. With each bite, something inside her loosened, not fear, but the tight hold it had kept on her for so long. Nathaniel moved quietly around the room, mending a loose board near the window, then adjusting the curtain she had not noticed was torn. He did not watch her closely, but he was aware, always aware. Her gaze drifted across the table. The contract lay there, dried now, but ruined. The ink had bled beyond recognition, the words lost in blurred lines. Eliza stared at it. That paper had once felt like a chain waiting to close. Now it looked nothing more than a memory dissolving. Still, her hand trembled, because Jacob had never needed paper to claim her. Nathaniel's voice broke her thoughts. "You can stay here." She looked up quickly. His back was turned as he spoke, his tone steady, as though stating something simple. "Until you decide where you're going. No pressure, no claim, a choice." Eliza swallowed, unsure how to respond. "Why?" she asked quietly. The question lingered in the air. Nathaniel paused, then turned. His eyes met hers, not searching, not judging. "Because you needed help," he said. Nothing more. No hidden meaning, no expectation in return. Eliza lowered her eyes again, her throat tightening. No one had ever given her something so simple without taking something first. The silence between them deepened, but it was not uncomfortable. It was steady. Later that morning, Eliza stepped outside to fetch water from the well. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. As she lowered the bucket, she felt it, a presence. She turned. A woman stood at a distance along the path, watching. Her eyes moved slowly over Eliza, from her face to her clothes to the cabin behind her. Judgment, curiosity, something sharper beneath it. Then the woman turned and walked on. Eliza exhaled slowly. The storm had passed, but something else was already beginning. By midday, the whispers had found their way into town. A stranger, a woman, in Nathaniel Hayes's cabin. And by evening, as Eliza sat by the fire mending the torn curtain, she felt it pressing in from beyond the walls. Voices she could not hear, but knew too well. Nathaniel placed another log on the fire. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. Eliza's hand stilled. "You don't know what they'll say," she replied softly. He looked at her then. "I do." Something in his tone made her lift her eyes. "They talk," he continued. "Always have." A pause, then more firmly. "Doesn't make them right." Eliza held his gaze for a moment longer than she meant to, then nodded faintly. That night, as the wind brushed softly against the cabin walls, Eliza lay behind the thin curtain once more. Nathaniel remained by the fire, silent, steady, and though the world beyond the hill was already stirring with judgment, inside that cabin, for the first time in months, Eliza Carter slept without fear.
Market day in Red Bluff arrived with noise, color, and watchful eyes. Wagons crowded the main road, their wheels grinding against packed dirt. Vendors called out prices over one another, voices rising above the hum of trade. The scent of baked bread, leather, and livestock filled the warm afternoon air. Children darted between stalls, laughter cutting through the bustle. And beneath it all, whispers. Eliza Carter felt them before she heard them. They followed her like a shadow. She walked beside Nathaniel Hayes, her hands clasped tightly around the edge of an empty basket. Her dress was simple, carefully mended, but she still felt exposed beneath the weight of so many glances. "They're looking," she murmured under her breath. Nathaniel did not turn. "Let them," he said quietly. His voice was steady, as though the crowd held no power over him. He walked with the same calm stride he carried on the hillside, unhurried, unbothered. Eliza drew a breath and lifted her chin just slightly. If he could stand in this place without bending, then so could she. They stopped at a stall near the center of the square. Eliza bent to inspect a bundle of cloth, running her fingers over its rough weave. It was ordinary work, simple, grounding. For a moment, she almost forgot the eyes. Then, hoofbeats shattered the rhythm of the square. Fast, heavy, unforgiving. The sound cut through the noise like a blade. Eliza's body stiffened before she even turned. She knew. A group of riders burst into the square, dust rising beneath their horses. Conversations faltered, voices dropped. One by one, heads turned. At the front rode Jacob Rollins. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Even across the distance, he was unmistakable. His posture confident, his coat immaculate despite the road. That same polished image, the man the town admired, the man she feared. Beside him rode a stocky man clutching a leather case, a lawyer. Of course. Jacob pulled his horse to a sharp halt in the center of the square. He dismounted slowly, deliberately, as though stepping onto a stage. "Eliza Carter," he called out. His voice carried easily, slicing through the lingering noise. The square fell silent. Every eye turned. Toward him, toward her, toward the moment neither could escape. Eliza felt her knees weaken, but she did not move. Jacob approached, his boots striking the ground with measured confidence. His gaze swept over her, assessing, calculating, before settling into a smile she knew too well. "She's lost her senses," he announced to the crowd. Murmurs stirred. He gestured toward her, his tone smooth, almost concerned. "She carries my child," he continued, "and yet she runs like a frightened girl." The words struck like a blow. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Eliza's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the whispers rising around her. Lies, all lies, but spoken with such ease, such certainty. Her throat tightened. "You never—" she began, her voice shaking. Jacob laughed, cutting her off. "Careful, Eliza," he said lightly. "You'll only make this worse." His eyes hardened, though his smile remained. "I've come to take her home," he added, addressing the crowd once more, "where she belongs." The word echoed, belongs, a chain wrapped in politeness. Eliza felt the weight of it pressing down, pulling at the fragile strength she had built. Faces in the crowd shifted, some uncertain, some already judging. It would be so easy for them to believe him. He was known, respected, and she was nothing more than a stranger in a borrowed place. Her fingers tightened around the basket. Then slowly she let it fall. The sound of it hitting the dirt seemed louder than it should have been. "You never touched me," she said. Her voice trembled, but it carried. The square stilled again. The accusation cut clean through Jacob's performance. For a moment, just a moment, his composure slipped. Then he recovered, his expression twisting into a mocking smile. "Her word," he said with a shrug. A few heads in the crowd nodded. Doubt crept back in. Eliza felt it, felt herself slipping beneath it, until Nathaniel moved. He stepped forward, placing himself between Eliza and Jacob. The shift was immediate. He did not raise his voice, did not rush. He simply stood, tall, unyielding, a presence that demanded attention without asking for it. Jacob's gaze narrowed. "And who are you?" he demanded. Nathaniel did not answer. Instead, his voice rolled out across the square, deep, steady, impossible to ignore. "She belongs to me since last night." Silence followed, not the quiet of uncertainty, but the kind that falls when something irreversible has been spoken. Eliza's breath caught. The words struck through her like lightning. The crowd reacted in waves, gasps, whispers, startled looks exchanged between neighbors. Jacob blinked, once, twice. His composure faltered just for a heartbeat. Then he recovered, his expression twisting into a mocking smile. "So that's it," he sneered, "a widower and a runaway." But the laughter he expected never came. The crowd had changed. Uncertainty now pointed in both directions. Jacob felt it. For the first time, he was no longer the only voice with weight. He took a step back, small but unmistakable. "This isn't over," he said sharply. Then he turned, mounting his horse with rigid control. Within seconds, the riders were gone, dust trailing behind them as they disappeared down the road. The square remained still. Eliza stood where she was, her heart racing, her thoughts spinning. Nathaniel's words echoed again in her mind. "She belongs to me, since last night." She did not understand it, did not know what it meant, but she knew one thing with certainty. Jacob had stepped back, and for the first time, someone had stood in front of her and made him do it.
Night settled over Whispering Creek with a quiet that felt heavier than the storm that had once driven Eliza to this place. The cabin stood still beneath the dark sky, its small window glowing faintly with firelight. Outside, the wind moved softly through the pines, brushing against the roof in low whispers. But inside, the silence carried something sharper. Unspoken words. Eliza stood near the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The events of the day clung to her like dust she could not shake. The marketplace, the stairs, Jacob's voice, each moment replayed with relentless clarity. But more than anything, it was Nathaniel's words that would not leave her. "She belongs to me, since last night." They echoed again and again, stirring something she did not yet understand. Behind her, Nathaniel moved quietly near the hearth, adding a log to the fire. The flames rose, casting shifting shadows along the walls. He did not look at her immediately. He seemed content to let the silence remain. But Eliza could not. "Why did you say it?" Her voice broke through the stillness, trembling despite her effort to steady it. Nathaniel paused. The crackle of fire filled the space between them. Eliza turned slowly, her eyes searching his face. "Why would you stand there, before all of them, and say that I belong to you?" The question hung heavy in the room. Nathaniel straightened, his expression calm, though something deeper moved beneath it. "Because I wanted to." The answer came simply, too simply. Eliza shook her head, frustration rising. "That's not enough!" Her voice gained strength, driven by something long held back. "You don't know what that means," she continued. "You don't know what it sounds like when a man says those words to a woman." Nathaniel's gaze held steady, but he did not interrupt. Eliza stepped closer, her breath uneven. "It starts small," she said, her voice tightening. "Words like that, promises, protection." She swallowed hard. "Then it changes. It becomes control. Then you don't get to choose anything anymore." Her eyes glistened, but she did not look away. "I've lived that," she whispered. The fire cracked sharply behind them. Nathaniel took a slow breath. "I know enough," he said quietly. Eliza shook her head again. "No, you don't." Silence stretched, but this time it was not empty. It was full of truth waiting to settle. Nathaniel stepped forward, but not too close. He left space between them, as though aware of the boundary she needed. "I'm not him." His words were low but firm. Eliza's chest rose and fell quickly. "That's what he said too," she replied. Nathaniel nodded once. "I won't argue that." The response caught her off guard. No defense, no denial, only acceptance of her doubt. He continued, his voice steady. "I don't want to own you, Eliza." The statement lingered, clear, uncomplicated. "Then why say it?" she asked again, softer now. Nathaniel held her gaze. "Because they would have believed him." Truth, plain and undeniable. Eliza's expression faltered. "And because," he added, pausing briefly as though weighing his words carefully, "I meant something else." Her breath caught. "What?" she asked. He stepped a fraction closer, not enough to overwhelm her, just enough to be heard. "I don't mean that you belong to me." A pause. "That I want you with me." The words settled slowly, like snow falling over unsettled ground. Eliza did not speak. Her heart pounded, torn between instinct and something new she did not yet trust. Fear rose, but alongside it, something quieter. Hope, fragile, dangerous.
"I don't know how to trust that," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel nodded. "You don't have to," he said. "Not yet." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed lightly beneath her chin, lifting her gaze just enough so their eyes met fully. "I'll still be here," he continued, "when you decide." There was no pressure in his words, no demand, only patience and certainty. For a long moment, neither moved. The fire crackled softly behind them. The world beyond the cabin faded into silence. Then, gently, without haste, without force, Nathaniel leaned forward and kissed her. It was not the kind of kiss Eliza had known before. There was no claim in it, no urgency, no attempt to take. It was steady, careful, a question, not an answer. When he pulled back, he did not step closer. He gave her space again. Eliza stood still, her hand rising slowly to her lips. Her breath trembled, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar warmth that lingered there. "Nathaniel," she began, her voice uncertain. He shook his head slightly. "You don't have to say anything." He stepped back, returning to the quiet distance he had always kept. "I only wanted you to know." Eliza turned toward the window again, her thoughts restless, her heart unsteady. Outside, the sky stretched wide and dark, scattered with stars. So much space, so much unknown. She had spent so long running from something. Now she stood at the edge of something else entirely, something she did not yet understand. Behind her, Nathaniel settled into his chair by the fire, silent, steady, waiting. And for the first time in a long while, Eliza Carter realized she was not being chased. She was being given a choice, and that frightened her almost as much as it gave her hope. Winter did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, like a long breath drawn across Whispering Creek. Frost touched the edges of leaves, the air sharpened. Mornings carried a stillness that felt different from before, less like isolation, more like something settling into place. And in that stillness, change began to take root. Eliza Carter no longer walked through Red Bluff with her head lowered. Not fully, not yet without memory, but enough that the weight of the town no longer bent her spine. It began in small ways, a nod from a passing farmer, a woman at the well who no longer turned her back, children who watched her with curiosity instead of fear. The whispers did not vanish overnight, but they softened, and slowly something else took their place: recognition. Up on the hill, the cabin changed too. It was no longer just a place of refuge. It became a place of purpose. Each morning, Eliza opened the door to a handful of children waiting in the cold, their small hands clutching slates and scraps of paper. At first there were only 2, then 4, then more. She taught them letters, sounds, simple words that slowly became meaning. Inside the small room Nathaniel had built onto the cabin, the quiet once filled with silence now held voices, uncertain at first, then growing stronger with each passing day. Nathaniel worked alongside it all without needing recognition. He built benches from rough wood, smoothing each edge with care. He carved simple toys that the children clutched as though they were treasures. He repaired what broke, strengthened what was fragile. He never stepped into Eliza's space, but he was always there, steady, present. And over time, Eliza noticed something she had not expected. She no longer watched him with guarded fear. She watched him with understanding. Trust did not come all at once. It came in moments, the way he stepped back when she needed space, the way he listened without pressing for answers, the way his presence never demanded anything in return. And one evening, as snow began to fall softly outside, Eliza realized something had shifted. She was no longer waiting for him to change. She was no longer expecting harm to follow kindness. She was choosing to stay. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she wanted to. That truth settled quietly inside her, and when she looked at Nathaniel across the firelight, she did not feel trapped. She felt seen. Time moved forward. The town followed. News of Jacob Rawlins's arrest reached Red Bluff before the first heavy snowfall. The ledger he had dropped, filled with fraudulent dealings and false accounts, had spoken more clearly than any accusation ever could. The man who once stood tall in the square was brought low by his own deception, and with his fall, the last thread tying Eliza to fear began to unravel. Still, the town did not forget easily, but it learned. At the winter service, the chapel filled with candlelight and quiet voices. Families gathered close, their breaths visible in the cold air as hymns rose softly through the wooden walls. Eliza entered beside Nathaniel. For a moment, the room stilled. Old habits lingered, eyes turned, judgments paused at the edge of memory. Then Nathaniel did something he had never done before. He stood, slowly, deliberately. His presence drew the attention of the entire room. Those who knew him understood the weight of it. Nathaniel Hayes did not speak often, and never without reason. "I have something to say," he began. His voice carried, not loudly, but with certainty. He reached for Eliza's hand, not pulling, not claiming, simply holding. And for the first time, she did not hesitate. She let him. "She does not belong to me," he said. The words settled across the room, quiet but unmistakable. Eliza's breath caught. "She belongs to this place," he continued, "to this place, to what she has built." A pause. "To herself." The silence that followed was different from any before. It was not filled with doubt. It was filled with recognition. Slowly, one by one, heads nodded. A woman near the front smiled faintly. An older man shifted his weight, murmuring agreement. The wall that once stood between Eliza and the town did not shatter, but it cracked, and through that crack, light came in. Eliza felt tears rise, but she did not hide them. For the first time, she stood in that room not as someone tolerated, but as someone accepted. Later that night, as snow fell softly across the hillside, Eliza stood at the cabin window. The town lights flickered faintly below. The world felt quiet again, but not empty. Behind her, Nathaniel moved gently through the room, adding wood to the fire. No words were needed. She turned toward him, and in that moment, her choice became clear, not spoken, not forced, but real. She stepped forward, closing the distance, not out of fear, not out of necessity, but out of something stronger, something she had fought her way back to, freedom. And in that freedom, she chose him. Outside, winter settled fully over Whispering Creek. Inside the cabin on the hill, warmth held steady, not just from the fire, but from something built slowly, patiently, and without force. A life, a beginning, and a love that had never needed to claim, only to be chosen.